morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday the day started out as a great day for genre movie fans. Emphasis on started out. We woke up to two exciting new trailers. Marvel's first full trailer for Ant-Man and the second trailer for Terminator Genesis. Both, at the very least, generated copious amounts of discussion on the internets. And of course, both these trailers have been released because they're set to debut in front of Avengers Age of Ultron, which very soon will be playing overseas. But yesterday was also special because when we woke up, it was the morning of the world premiere of Avengers Age of Ultron. And I think we were all pretty giddy about that because I think we expected a few stories to leak out of the first showing of the film. Now, either A, they have an amazing embargo policy on reviews and discussion for the premiere, and for once, people are actually abiding by it. For more on that, be sure to listen to the third story today about Game of Thrones and members of the media not abiding by that sacred covenant of trust. Or B, Marvel just spoiled everything in advance. They were like, okay, no Captain Marvel, no end credit scenes. There is a mid-credit scene. And they just kind of set everybody up and they're like, you're going to see Black Panther, you're not going to see Spider-Man. And then just, I guess, left a good story for us to behold. But the level of chatter coming out of that premiere, I'm surprised at how low it is. But that was nothing compared to the other knocks we took by the end of the day yesterday. So what happened? Well, one, of course, was that Olivia Munn was announced as the new Psylocke in X-Men Apocalypse. And that's such stunning news that it's getting its own segment later today over on the main Beyond the Trailer channel. So stay tuned for that. But there was more rough news, which is we're going to discuss today on Morning Movie News. So what was there? Well, there are two big stories, as you can see from the pictures here. They have to do with Wonder Woman and the Hulk. And we'll start with the Wonder Woman story, because this is a pretty big deal. And that's that Wonder Woman lost its director. Michelle MacLaren said, you know what? I don't want to direct this movie anymore, which is pretty shocking considering she's never directed a movie before. And Warner Brothers said, you know what, we don't want you to direct it. So they amicably parted ways with plenty of headlines, leaving plenty of headlines in their wake. Now, The Hollywood Reporter is the trade that broke the story, and they were like, ooh, shades of Patty Jenkins. When she left Thor 2 over creative differences, and then they brought in Alan Taylor from Game of Thrones, and the movie still didn't work out very well. So they were making that comparison, and then they extrapolated the whole thing to mean perhaps a larger discussion as to whether or not women just can't cut it in big blockbuster movie making, which is a ridiculous assumption to make, especially considering who they're talking about. Now, I thought it was very interesting, first of all, they didn't mention Edgar Wright, who also found himself in a similar situation, only much more devastating. Michelle MacLaren spent what, like maybe couple of months on this, right? Developing Wonder Woman, because she was supposed to not only direct it, but help develop the script. Edgar Wright, 8 freaking years! So he has a much bigger, problem here, and I think he's a much better example of, a creative difference actually leading to a split. We also saw one recently with Gary Whitta writing that Rogue One spin-off for Star Wars, where he actually departed the script as well over, I think they didn't say it was creative differences, they were like, Gary's gone as far as he can go. He's out of creative juice. We got to bring somebody else on. And then they brought Chris Weitz on, who I'm surprised anybody would ever bring Chris Weitz on to fix anything. He scripted Cinderella, and I think many, even if you enjoyed Cinderella, would feel that was kind of like the weakest part of Cinderella, the writing. And then, of course, he went and did The Golden Compass a couple of years ago, which was just awful. It's amazing anyone could work after making The Golden Compass, but Hollywood is a special town. So anyway, why do I think that Michelle MacLaren is a different situation than Edgar Wright and Patty Jenkins? Well, here's the big difference. Edgar Wright and Patty Jenkins are very niche filmmakers. They're so far from blockbuster filmmaking where they're coming from. Patty Jenkins, she got her name on the Hollywood map directing Monster, which of course won Charlize Theron an Oscar. But that's a very different movie than anything Marvel's ever put out or any big blockbuster has ever been. So, you could see why they might have creative differences there, right? Where she doesn't understand, the mind of the mainstream moviegoer and the certain demands that she needs to meet, right? So that's understandable. Maybe even the same could be said for Edgar Wright, who's never had a box office hit, has a very strong UK sensibility, although there are so many UK fans for these properties, you would imagine that Edgar Wright would know what he was doing. And also, for instance, we also have to note that James Gunn, total niche filmmaker, never had any success, prior to Guardians of the Galaxy. Marvel trusted his creative voice, and it paid off quite handsomely. So one could wish that there was maybe a little bit more trust with Patty Jenkins and Edgar Wright to bring something really interesting to the table. For instance, the way also the Russo brothers turned out. Russo brothers went from doing like episodes of Community and Welcome to Collinwood to not only making an amazing Captain America the Winter Soldier, but being new directors on the Avengers Infinity War films. You know, that's a two-parter, so they're directing two Avengers films after Civil War. So that turned out well. So, you know, you have to wonder what these other two parties, Patty Jenkins and Edgar Wright, put on the table that made Marvel go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Perhaps, you know, Joss Whedon wasn't in their corner, but I would be surprised if Joss Whedon wasn't in Edgar Wright's corner because they have very similar sensibility. So anyway, the reason that Michelle MacLaren is different than both of these two people is that she is smack dab in the middle of this whole phenomenon right now. Sure, she's only done television, but look at the television this woman has done. Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Better Call Saul. These are all phenomenally successful shows that are incredibly well regarded. She is just like in the eye of the storm. And if she has a creative idea, I think that you should like it, Warner Brothers, right? Or maybe you could call up like Vince Gilligan and you know, D.B. Benioff and say, you know, the different people who make these television shows who are the showrunners and be like, psst, what do you think of Michelle's creative idea? If she floated this to you on one of these shows, what would you say? So, I mean, I just think that she's just such a perfect choice for this whole world that I hope that her walking off of Wonder Woman means that probably Warner Brothers has bad ideas, hopefully. Maybe she's like, I mean, we're all hoping the DC Cinematic Universe is going to turn itself around, but this certainly isn't encouraging, right? If Michelle MacLaren doesn't fit with your creative vision, I think you have to ask yourself, what's wrong with your creative vision? My only hope is that somebody else will pick her up because now she's available and she wants to direct a feature, and I think that she has such an impressive resume and such a strong understanding of this fan base that it's ridiculous not to use her. Now this calls, the only thing this called back to mind for me was the discussion when Wonder Woman was first developed as a film and they were signing Michelle MacLaren, was that they were going to do something where Wonder Woman was a period piece, much like Captain America the First Avenger. And she came into the world, you know, like right as feminism was beginning to become a thing, and she was like, "Oh, not only am I a fighter and you know, someone who fights for justice, but I fight for women's rights." And they do a whole fish out of water thing where she couldn't believe how women were treated. Well, I think you could look at the ratings for Agent Carter, and no matter how accurate that might be, I think you can see that that's not really something that a lot of people are interested in experiencing or watching on, you know, maybe on a one-off, but certainly not on a regular weekly basis like they were with Agent Carter. So I think Wonder Woman is a very tricky property. I think Gal Gadot, I have faith in Gal Gadot. I liked her, as I've said many times, in the Fast and Furious films, but she's still risky. You know, this is the lead role, which she has not proven herself in yet. And I think that Michelle MacLaren was doing a lot to give some gravitas to this Wonder Woman film, and I hope that they're working very hard to find a replacement. I would actually suggest not doing a female director, because if you have a female lead, superhero lead, and you have, by the way, don't even get me started on how Captain Marvel is developing as like a hearts and rainbows and unicorn property with the screenwriters for Inside Out and the female screenwriter on Guardians of the Galaxy who did a great job with Gamora, right? I mean, I don't know, that's super scary. But I think that you don't want these to become like femfests, you know? Like, oh, this is a girl party, guys, get out of here. I mean, that's the last thing we want for these characters, right? And look what Joss Whedon did with Black Widow. Look what the Russo brothers did with Black Widow. I think get a good male director on there so it seems like more of a party for everyone. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, what could be as equally scary as that, and that Olivia Munn was cast as Psylocke? Well, how about the idea that we're probably never going to get a standalone Hulk movie? That's pretty dire news. And it was dragged out of Mark Ruffalo. You know, these guys are singing like canaries for the press interviews for Avengers Age of Ultron. First Kevin Feige with Peter Parker over the weekend, and now Mark Ruffalo. But he admitted, and he said, look, you know, I'm sorry to say that the reason we're not doing a Hulk movie, a standalone Hulk film, is that's still a universal property when it comes to solo films. Much like Spider-Man is a solo as a solo properties with Sony. Now, it was just with Sony purely, but of course Marvel went and cut a deal where they can use the character in their group films and they'll advise Sony on the standalone films. So one might think, well, why can't we just do that with the Hulk, right? Why don't we, but then, you know, so that's what you would think. Why don't we just cut a deal? Feige, you can, you know, oversee Universal releasing it. What do we care as long as we get our Mark Ruffalo Hulk movie? But here's the thing that drove the Spider-Man deal was that Kevin Feige really wanted him for Civil War, which is weird because he changed the age of the character in Civil War. So if he's such a stickler for the storyline in Civil War, it's odd that he would want a teenage Peter Parker to fill the spot of a very adult Peter Parker in the comic. But anyway, we'll see how that turns out. But anyway, that's what drove the Sony Marvel deal, the need to have Peter Parker in that story. So I think the only thing that could drive a similar deal, and I, by the way, still to this day don't think Peter Parker is necessary for that story. So we'll see. We'll see, though. We'll see. But the thing is that I don't think that Kevin Feige has really fallen in love with any Hulk storylines. Now you might think to yourself, well, what about Planet Hulk? That's a great story, and it is a great story. And I think that Mark Ruffalo has said that he thinks it's a great story and that he would like to do it. But here's the problem. Planet Hulk is a Hulk, really, truly a Hulk standalone movie. There's no other Avengers in it. He literally, that's the whole point of the story, that he's shipped off like John Carter to an alien planet. He becomes a gladiator, he rises, he frees his people, and he falls in love with another alien warrior from the gladiator pits, and they have a child, a son of Hulk. And it's a very interesting storyline. It's one of the most interesting things that's ever happened to the Hulk. But the thing is, again, there are no other Avengers you can shoehorn into that movie, right? So that's a problem, one, because they like doing that, especially now. Like, look what happened to Civil War. It's really Avengers 2.5. And then also, how do you do a big, strong romance with the Hulk, right, when Joss Whedon just hooked her up with Black Widow in this new movie? Which I'm not complaining about. I can't wait to see it. But so that's another big problem. You're like, what about Natasha, Bruce? You're cheating on her with this alien lady, and you've had a child? Natasha will not be happy when you get back to Earth. I guess whatever happens on Planet Hulk stays on Planet Hulk, I guess you could say, but I digress. But the only thing that would make Planet Hulk truly happen is if Kevin Feige were to fall in love with the World War Hulk storyline, which is what followed Planet Hulk. And that's where Hulk was upset for being banished to this gladiator alien planet by the council of like Tony Stark, Reed Richards, T'Challa, I believe he was on there, Doctor Strange. They were all like, Hulk's too dangerous. We got to get him out of here. So Hulk came back, and he was like, I'm back! And he tried to like lay waste to the earth. And, he didn't change back to his Bruce Banner form. It was also a very interesting story. But, that's what Kevin Feige would have to fall in love with. And he'd be like, well, I can't have World War Hulk unless I have Planet Hulk, so get Universal on the phone. But I just don't see that happening, and I certainly don't see it happening within the time span that Mark Ruffalo will be playing the character. I mean, they've paced these movies out to like 2020 and beyond with Infinity War. So maybe like someone could punch Hulk during Infinity War, and he lands off on the gladiator planet, and they could follow that, go with that going forward. But that's so far in the future. I don't know if Mark Ruffalo would still want to play the character, and who knows what other fan favorites might have emerged by then. So I think this is bad news for Mark Ruffalo. I wonder if he knew it when he signed on. I still think this has done a lot for his career, and I think he's just a fantastic Bruce Banner. That's, I think, the key to his success. He's a great Bruce Banner. And I think Edward Norton could have been a great Bruce Banner, but I think that story just didn't work out so well. The script was pretty weak there with the Abomination, and just the whole way it developed was not great. But I wish that with this new, think tech they've got going over at Marvel Studios, we could get a standalone Hulk movie. But I just don't see Kevin Feige falling enough in love with World War Hulk in the time frame that Mark Ruffalo needs for us to ever really see it any time in the near future. So, but that answers a burning question, right? Although I guess the other question is, who owns the standalone rights to Black Widow, right? Nobody. Where's the movie? All right, so let's talk about the third story of the day. This is actually a story I got a lot of requests from to cover. So even though it's not really movie news, I got so many requests to discuss it, and I always appreciate when you guys think of me when you read a movie news story, that I did want to honor that request. So it's about Game of Thrones. And prior to the debut on Sunday night, it made a big headline on Saturday that the first 4 episodes of the series had leaked. And they were able to trace it back to somebody who was a TV reviewer. They said, oh, this is a TV screener that was sent out. Often when they want people to review these television shows, and often even movies, they'll send out screeners. And so they'll send out a DVD or a Blu-ray. It's usually a DVD, actually. And same thing like for Oscar season with the movies, and those often leak as well. And they've come to really putting a lot of warnings on there and watermarking them and being like, if you leak this, we'll know. And they did find that guy who leaked Expendables 3, as we recently discussed. So if you leaked Game of Thrones, you should watch your back. Warner Brothers is getting quite vindictive when it comes to digital leaks. Well, this is, HBO, but still, I don't think it's the same company anymore. But anyway, Lionsgate, all the companies are really, really on this. They are not playing around anymore. So that's the thing. It came from a TV screener, right? So I think that what's going to really change here, and it was downloaded a ton of times, like 100,000 times right away. But the thing is that, and I'm sure HBO was hoping to stem this kind of digital piracy with the launch of HBO Now, right? Like, you have no excuse to pirate it. You can subscribe to our service directly through a digital platform. And I think that might help to some degree, but then of course when something's available early, everyone just jumps over and grabs it. Now, Game of Thrones is already the most pirated show in the world. I think it's the most pirated anything in the world, and it hasn't really hurt it, actually. So I don't think that HBO is like too upset about this. I think they're probably a little miffed, and I think they're certainly going to hunt down whoever did this. But I think what it's really going to affect is how this kind of stuff becomes available to reviewers going forward, right? And I think that because as you get more digital reviewers, more online reviewers, and I think as HBO perhaps got a little too aggressive and overzealous in trying to cast a wide net in terms of coverage, and how much coverage does Game of Thrones really need, right? Who here read a Game of Thrones review? I didn't read any of them because I didn't want any spoilers, and I was like, I'm definitely watching it. I don't care what any reviewers say. So I would actually tell them, like, for season 6, you don't need to have anybody review it, and that way you can not have any leaks. Although I would worry about HBO Now maybe leading to more leaks, so we'll see. Better quality leaks. Who knows what will happen. Although, you know, you can watch it on HBO Go beforehand, so I guess it's really the same situation. But that's the problem. And then, so with the reviewers is the leak. So if as you send to more reviewers who are out there, I think there's no really delicate way to say it. I think you maybe choose a couple of websites that get decent traffic, but perhaps aren't as, aren't as willing to play by the rules, the unspoken rules of Hollywood, right? Like, you don't leak the episodes. So, somebody got their hands on it, and HBO or perhaps sent this screener to somebody they probably shouldn't have, that was more interested in maybe, I don't know if you make any money when you leak something, or maybe this person was just a media anarchist and was like, who should have to pay for Game of Thrones? I'm the Robin Hood of HBO, or the internets. So they got this screener in the hands of someone like that. So I think what you're really going to see are two things. One, no reviews at all. Or HBO will pull back and really only stick with old school reviewing outlets, right? And that's really unfortunate for the rest of us who have to work so hard to convince the studios and the HBO, the different channels that we can be trusted, right? We're like, this isn't the Wild Wild West, and then they're like, oh yeah, what about what's happening right over there? And it's like, don't look over there, just look at me, So it's really unfortunate, and it's unfair to the rest of the online entertainment media community. So thanks a lot, whoever leaked it. So that's a problem. And then also, something else that they could do is they could just have screenings where you have to actually go to a physical theater to watch the first couple of episodes if you want to review it. That's probably what I would do. I would send screeners to the old school people who aren't going to leak it, and then I would have, because old school people pass it around to their friends and family, but they don't leak it online, and that's the big difference. And then if anybody wanted to review it from the online press, I'd probably make them go to a screening. So thanks for ruining it for everybody else, whoever leaked it. So I'm curious to what you guys think. What would you do if you were HBO and you were in this situation? How would you handle screenings for reviews going forward? And what do you think of the person who leaked it? Do you agree with them or do you not agree with them? BTT viewer Alex Meyer actually wrote me an email, and he said he was having an argument with another BTT viewer over piracy, and that he said it bordered on harassment. So I didn't really kind of want to, you guys, I don't want to be like the police of the comment section, but I would ask you when discussing this to be polite, as you would when discussing any movie news topic, right? And just to understand that everybody has a point here, and we should all listen to what everybody has to say, right? I mean, I can understand sometimes why people advocate piracy. I don't agree with it, but I think to have a civil discussion, we should listen to what everybody has to say, and and it's tough to do because, for that really to work, you have to listen to what people say that you might not necessarily agree with. All right? And at the end of the day, we have nothing at stake here personally, right? We're not HBO. We're not the people who run the torrent sites, unless maybe you are. So we're just having a discussion. All right, so let's get on to the viewer question of the day, which I picked. It's actually from last week from a female viewer. I don't know if she's a woman or a girl, but it's Lucy from the UK. And Lucy really, this was a great question because I had a similar problem myself actually yesterday on the my Ant-Man trailer review. And, people, as I tweeted, I rewatched my Ant-Man trailer review, and it's not that negative. Everybody just attacked me, or not everybody, because actually, most of overall the response to that trailer review was very positive. You can see from the likes to dislikes ratio. But there were a couple really rabid Marvel fanboys who were like, if you don't say this is absolutely 100% positive, you're ridiculous. And I was like, oh, was I too harsh on it? So I went back and I watched it, and I was like, you guys are crazy who told me I was too harsh. You know, I was actually overall pretty positive, and I think any of my misgivings came from, I think, a lack of a solid tone or focus for the trailer. Is it for kids? Is it for adults? And then also that I also a sameness to some of the other properties, but I felt that even though I liked it, that I was worried about its appeal beyond, you know, the hardcore Marvel fan demographic, right, or comic book readers. And so I voiced that concern. And some people, you know, that's all they could hear. I think it's interesting sometimes. It's like if you say one little negative thing, people are drawn to the negative. And so you can have a whole video of positives, and if you just have like a couple negatives, that's all some people hear. It's really weird. It's interesting. It's like one of those experiments, psychological experiments, right? But anyway, somebody wrote to me and they said, oh, I don't think you're a real comic book fan because, you know, you don't have the same frame of reference that I do. Comic books are an interesting medium. They're cyclical, so but every cycle isn't the same, right? So people jump in at different times. So you might like these kind of comics or this version of a character. I might like this version of a character, right? And people have different pockets of expertise. Like I think any comic book reader has a general idea of most characters, but then like there's the character you really love and you just become engrossed in, and you know every single infinite detail, right? So someone was like, oh, I don't think you're a real comic book fan. Well, I took care of that, but then I felt it reminded me of a question that had been asked to me, which I also felt pretty bad about. It reminded me of things that I hear a couple of times now and then on the internet. So this is what Lucy had to say, and her YouTube handle is Dusted Morphagus, and she said, "Hi Grace. This is my first time asking a question, so I really hope that this gets answered. I never even considered picking up a comic book until one of my best friends dragged me, to be honest, pretty unwillingly, to see the Avengers. Little did I know that 3 years later I can barely wait until I get to see my two favorite super ladies, Captain Marvel and Scarlet Witch, on the big screen. Oh, isn't that a great story? I don't know if I just have a habit of running into horrible people, but I've noticed a certain amount of negativity to those who started reading comics because they love the movies they're based on so much, that they're not a real fan. The not a real fan argument is brought up a lot, as well as the ever-present fake geek girl stereotype. Surely fans like me who are willing to give the original source material a shot are a good thing, since it's showing that the movies are giving the comics more exposure. I was just wondering what your opinion on this is. Thanks for reading, Lucy." Lucy, I feel your pain. I think it's happened to every female comic book reader at some point, and I'm sure some male comic book readers as well who are just trying to enter this wonderful world of comics. And I would have to say that if anyone's doing that to you, it's a small, vocal, angry group who I think it's actually coming from fear. And I discussed this when I talked about the anger against Black Widow last week. I think that the real issue here is that old school comic book fans, they're like, you know what, this has been my thing for almost my entire life. It's like my niche. And here comes a whole wave of people that are going to take it away from me and maybe make my love of comics not as special as it once was. Now, I can understand that fear. That's a really bad way to look at it, though, if you're in that camp, because you should look at it as A, here's a whole bunch of new people for me to talk comics with, and B, since all these people are now reading comics, maybe that'll help the medium and keep it around a little bit longer, because we all know not as many people read comics anywhere near as they used to. It is a medium that has a lot of trouble, and the whole reason that it's fighting so hard for its very existence is that when the studios that have acquired these comic book publishers look at the numbers, they go, well, the number of people reading this versus the number of people watching it is ridiculously different, so we're going to focus on the bigger number. And so that's why I think that now you have, in terms of the cart versus the horse, the movies and the TV shows have become the horse and the comic books the cart, when I strongly believe it should be the other way around. Or at least, you know, we shouldn't have a horse and a cart. These should work together on the same level. But anyway, so that's, I think, the root of the issue. Now, as for your fake geek girl comment, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, it's where someone will look at a girl or, you know, any female reader and be like, oh, I've made a snap judgment about you. You couldn't possibly like comics. You're just doing this because you think it's popular and you want to get in on this. Now, that's incredibly insulting. Now, there are some fake geek girls, but I wouldn't even say that they're evil or this is some master plan. I think the real heart of the issue there is that, you know, as there's more and more comic book coverage, the old school Hollywood thinking is hot chicks sell. People like to watch hot women, so they hire women or, you know, and maybe they're a job opportunity, so these women are like, they want to get that job. And so these women don't have a personal interest in comics or this kind of, comic book pop culture, but it's their job. So they become interested in it, and they know a little bit about it from that exposure, but it's not something they would probably pursue on their own if they weren't doing this professionally or hoping to do it professionally. So that's where the fake geek girl name comes from. I wouldn't call it fake geek girl. I would say that some people are professionally interested in comics, even though they're not personally interested in it. And that happens in every business, right? There are always some people who cover everything that they're like, you know what, this isn't my personal bag, but I got into it because that's an opportunity that presented itself to me. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think those people, by the way, are also very obvious that that's who they are, so nobody should be upset with them because they're not like pretending that they love comics. But then I think to apply it to other people, I think is really, really rude and inappropriate. Especially, why would you discourage someone from being a fan of something that you love, right? I just think it's really a horrible thing. And I've had actually someone, try and challenge me. I would also like to say that sometimes people just think that's flirting. Sometimes guys think that's flirting. So, just like pulling a girl's hair on the playground, sometimes a guy might do that just to kind of like that's his opening line, or that's what he wants to say to you to start out. So be aware of that as well, and then maybe it's somebody you're interested in, and you're like, oh, an annoying comment brought us together. That's just the way some guys are. They flirt fight. So that's what. So Lucy, keep that in mind when that happens. But then I think there's just, again, as I said with the Black Widow thing, I think there's a real tug of war going on here into the direction of the future of these characters. And I think that, parties on both sides, the tensions and the emotions are running high, so therefore the tension is running high. So don't feel bad about it, and also don't let these people stop you from reading comics. Just keep going out there, enjoy them, and the more you read comics, the more powerful it'll make you. And also know your facts, Lucy, so if someone asks you and tries to pop quiz you, you can just show them just how much of a comic book fan you really are. And it sounds like and even, I don't even like saying that. Because if you've read just a few comics and you like them, or if you just even like the movies, or you just like the TV shows, you're a comic book fan. And this is an industry that should welcome everybody with open arms, and it's a fan base that should welcome everybody with open arms. And this having to prove yourself, I think, is a really nasty development, and I think that it will go away the more the rest of us just ignore it. Right? All right, so thank you so much for your question, Lucy, and read on. All right, so please write down below today what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question. Any words of encouragement you have for Lucy yourself, any of your own experiences would be greatly appreciated for her and anyone reading the comment section today. And then, of course, let me know what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.